There are messages that travel through the noise of the world and land exactly where they were always meant to land. This is one of those messages. But before you go any further, you need to understand something. This message is not for everyone. It was never written for the crowd. It was never designed for those who are comfortable, settled, and unbothered by the weight of their own story. This message was written for a very specific kind of person, and you will know within the next few sentences whether that person is you. This message is for you if you have ever lost something that you built with your own hands. It is for you if you have ever poured years of your life into something, a relationship, a dream, a version of yourself, and then watched it dissolve in ways you could not stop and could not fully explain. It is for you if you have ever stood in a room full of people and still felt the particular hollow ache of being completely alone, unseen and unheard in the deepest parts of who you are. It is for you if something inside you has shifted, broken open, or been fundamentally rearranged by a season that you did not choose and could not have prepared for. If you have walked through loss, if you have survived a separation that left you questioning who you are without the thing, or the person or the version of yourself that you once knew, if you have felt your own identity transform under the pressure of something far greater than you could explain, then heaven arranged this exact moment with extraordinary and deliberate precision. You did not stumble here. You were led here. And the difference between those two things is everything. There is a kind of grief that the world does not have adequate language for. It is not simply the grief of losing a person, though that grief is real, and it is heavy, and it deserves to be acknowledged. It is the grief of losing a season. It is the grief of watching a door close behind you and realizing, slowly and painfully, that you cannot go back through it, even if you wanted to. It is the grief of becoming someone new before you were ready to say goodbye to who you used to be. It is the disorientation of looking in a mirror and recognizing the face, but not quite recognizing the person behind the eyes. If you know that feeling, if you have sat with it in the dark hours of early morning, when everything else is quiet, and that feeling becomes the loudest thing in the room, then you are exactly who this message was written for. You are not too broken. You are not too late. You are not too far gone. You are precisely positioned right here, right now, for what heaven is about to speak over your life. The world will tell you that loss is a detour. The world will tell you that pain is a punishment, that if something was taken from you, it must mean you did something wrong, that if a season ended, it must mean you failed somewhere along the way. The world will tell you that if things had gone differently, if the relationship had held, if the opportunity had not slipped away, if the chapter had not closed the way it did, then maybe you would be further along. But heaven sees your story from a completely different angle. Heaven does not see your loss as a detour. Heaven sees it as a corridor that leads somewhere the comfortable and the undisturbed could never access, because they were never willing to be broken open enough to walk through it. The corridor is narrow, and it is dark, and it asks more of you than you thought you had to give. But it leads somewhere that no other path can reach. You are here because something happened to you that changed you, and that change, as painful and disorienting and costly as it has been, is not a sign that you missed your destiny. It is a sign that your destiny was serious enough to require that kind of transformation. Easy things do not produce chosen ones. Comfortable seasons do not birth carriers of divine purpose. Undisturbed lives do not produce the kind of depth that heaven needs in the people it assigns to the hardest and most important missions. The very thing that shook you was the very thing that selected you, and you need to let that truth move through you slowly and completely, because it is not a small truth. It is the kind of truth that, when you really receive it, reorganizes everything you thought you understood about the season you have been walking through. You have been in the wilderness, not metaphorically, but in the truest and most personal sense of that word. You have felt the dryness of seasons where nothing seemed to grow, where prayers felt like they were dissolving before they reached the ceiling, where the promises you once held with both hands started to feel like they belonged to a different, more hopeful version of you. And still you stayed. Still you kept breathing through it. Still you showed up, even on the days when showing up was the hardest and most costly thing you had ever been asked to do. That is not weakness wearing a brave face. That is not coincidence producing consistency. That is the unmistakable mark of someone who was built for more than the average story, someone whose roots go deeper than the drought can reach. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19 says, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." Let that settle. A way in the wilderness, rivers in the desert, not around the hard place, not beside it, but directly through it. Heaven does not reroute chosen ones around the wilderness. Heaven meets them there, in the middle of the dryness and the disorientation, and makes something out of the emptiness that could not have been made anywhere else. The wilderness is not where your story ends. It is where your story begins to make the kind of sense that only heaven can author. Here is what you need to understand about the wilderness you have walked through. It was not random. It was not accidental. It was not the result of heaven forgetting about you or turning its attention elsewhere, while something came and took from you what you had built. The wilderness was intentional. It was specific. It was shaped to fit the exact dimensions of what needed to happen inside you before you could carry the weight of what has been assigned to you. Gideon, one of the most extraordinary figures in all of Scripture, was hiding in a winepress when heaven found him. He was not on a platform. He was not leading an army. He was not in a place of visibility or influence or confidence. He was hiding, afraid, diminished by everything that had been taken from his people and from his sense of who he was. And it was exactly there, in that hidden and humbling place, that the angel of the Lord appeared to him and called him something that must have sounded impossible in that moment. Mighty warrior. Heaven called a hiding man a mighty warrior, not because of what he was doing, but because of what heaven had already placed inside him that the hiding could not remove. That is who you are. Not who the world has labeled you based on what you lost. Not who the painful season tried to convince you that you were. You are who heaven says you are, and heaven, looking at you in this very moment, is not seeing your losses. Heaven is seeing your assignment. Heaven is seeing the fullness of what was placed inside you before you were born, the capacity that the wilderness has been expanding rather than destroying, the purpose that the fire has been refining rather than consuming. If you are watching this right now and something in your chest is responding to these words, something that feels like recognition, like a part of you that has been very quiet for a long time is beginning to stir, I want you to do something in this moment. Type 777 in the comments right now. Not as a casual gesture, but as a declaration, as your agreement with this moment, as your way of saying out loud, even if only in a comment, I have been through the wilderness. I have survived the loss. I have walked through the separation. I have felt the transformation I did not ask for. And I am still here. I am still standing. And I am ready to receive everything that heaven has been holding for me on the other side of what I have walked through. Let 777 be your stake in the ground, your marker that says, this is where something shifted for me. Because here is the truth that heaven wants to establish in you before this message goes any further. Your loss did not diminish you, it distinguished you. The separation you survived did not reduce your capacity for love, for faith, for impact, for joy. It expanded every one of those things in ways that a life without that loss never could have. The transformation you walked through, the one that felt more like being taken apart than being built, was not a destruction. It was a preparation. And preparations of that depth, that cost, that intimacy are only given to those who are being prepared for something of extraordinary weight and extraordinary significance. There is a version of your life that exists just ahead of where you are standing right now. Not a version where the pain never happened, but a version where the pain became the very credential that opened doors nothing else could have opened. A version where the thing that tried to bury you became the foundation you built, something lasting upon. A version where everything that was taken made room, sacred and specific room, for everything that was always meant to arrive. That version is not fantasy. That version is not wishful thinking dressed up in spiritual language. That version is a divine promise, written before you were born, and it has your name on it. You are a chosen one. Not because your life has been easy, but because it has not been, and you are still here. Not because you have never doubted, but because even in your doubt, something in you refused to let go entirely. Not because you have it all figured out, but because you kept your face turned toward heaven even when heaven felt silent and distant and unreachable. And that faithfulness, that stubborn and costly and beautiful faithfulness, does not go unnoticed in the courts of heaven. Stay with this message. Every word that follows was arranged for you. The journey ahead in this conversation is going to take you deeper into who you are, why you were made the way you were made, and what has been waiting for you on the other side of everything you have walked through. You are not in the wrong place. You are in the only place you were ever meant to be in this exact moment. Heaven saw your courage today, and every attack that came against you just lost its power. You are still here. That matters more than you know. The fact that you did not close this out, the fact that something in you leaned in rather than pulled away, is not a small thing. It is evidence of something that has been true about you for longer than this moment. There is a hunger in you that ordinary things cannot satisfy. There is a depth in you that surface-level comfort cannot reach. And heaven has known that about you since before you took your first breath in this world. But before heaven could use what was placed inside you, something had to happen first. Something that looked, from the outside and often from the inside as well, like the opposite of preparation. It looked like reduction. It looked like diminishment. It looked like everything moving in the wrong direction at the wrong time for all the wrong reasons. And if you have ever been in a season like that, if you have ever felt the specific humiliation of being less visible, less influential, less certain of yourself than you once were, then the story of Gideon is going to find you in a place that very few things have ever reached. Gideon was not a man who started his story on a stage. He was not a man who began his calling in a moment of triumph or visibility or confidence. He began it in a winepress. That detail matters more than it might first appear. A winepress in that time and culture was a pit, a sunken place, a hollow in the ground where grapes were crushed to extract what was valuable from them. It was a place of compression. It was a place designed for the purpose of pressure, and Gideon was hiding in one, not because he was a coward at his core, but because the world around him had become so threatening, so overwhelming, and so relentless in its opposition that Hiding felt like the only reasonable response to an unreasonable situation. The Midianites had stripped his people of everything. For 7 years they had swept through the land at harvest time, taking the crops, destroying the livestock, leaving nothing behind. 7 years of that. 7 years of working and planting and hoping, and then watching everything be taken before it could be enjoyed. 7 years of waking up and rebuilding, and trying again only to have the trying undone. If you want to understand the emotional and spiritual landscape Gideon was living in when heaven found him, imagine what 7 years of loss does to a person's ability to believe that effort is worth anything. Imagine what 7 years of having the fruit of your labor stripped away does to your relationship with hope itself. Gideon was not simply afraid of the enemy. He was a man whose capacity for hope had been worn down by repetition, by the relentless rhythm of try and lose, try and lose, try and lose, until trying itself begins to feel naive. And yet he was still there. He had not given up entirely. He was hiding, yes, but he was hiding while threshing wheat. He was doing the work, even in the pit, even in the place of compression and hiddenness. He was not lying down in despair. He was working in secret, because working in secret was the only way he knew how to keep going. And that stubborn, hidden faithfulness, that refusal to completely stop, even when everything in his circumstances was screaming at him to stop, was exactly what heaven had been watching. Heaven saw him in the winepress before the angel ever appeared to him. Heaven saw the man who kept threshing wheat in secret and called that man a mighty warrior before the man knew his own name. Judges chapter 6 verse 12 says, "And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, 'The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor.'" Mighty man of valor. Spoken to a man hiding underground. Spoken to a man whose people had been stripped of everything 7 times over. Spoken to a man who had more questions than faith in that moment, more fear than certainty, more wounds than weapons. Heaven did not wait for Gideon to feel mighty before calling him mighty. Heaven called him what he was in the spirit before he could see it in the natural. And that is exactly what heaven is doing for you in this moment. Heaven is not waiting for you to feel like a chosen one before declaring that you are one. Heaven is not waiting for your circumstances to align, for your confidence to return, for the losses to be replaced before it speaks identity over you. Heaven is speaking it now, into the exact conditions you are in right now, into the winepress, into the hiding place, into the season of compression and hiddenness that you have been surviving. Because here is what the winepress was actually doing for Gideon, that he could not see from inside it. It was not simply the place he retreated to in fear. It was the place where the crushing was happening, and the crushing, as violent and undignified as it felt, was not destroying what was valuable in him. It was extracting it. It was separating the oil from the flesh, the essence from the husk, the thing of eternal worth from the things that were never meant to last. The winepress was doing, in the hidden place, what the open field never could have accomplished. And the same is true of every season of compression and hiddenness that you have walked through. The things that were taken from you were not the things of eternal worth. The things that were pressed out of you in the painful seasons were not your purpose or your calling or your identity. Those things were being refined, concentrated, made more potent, made more pure by the very pressure that felt like it was reducing you. You have been in a winepress, not because heaven abandoned you there, but because heaven knew what needed to happen inside you before you could carry the weight of what comes next. And what comes next for you is not a continuation of the losing season. What comes next is the moment when the angel appears. What comes next is the moment when heaven addresses you by your true name, rather than by the name your circumstances gave you. Think about the names your circumstances have given you: failed, forgotten, overlooked, behind, too broken to be used, too damaged to be trusted with something great, too far outside the narrative of success and significance for heaven to bother with. Those names came from the winepress. Those names came from the mouth of the enemy and from the voice of your own exhausted mind in seasons when the losses were too heavy and the hope was too thin. But they are not your name. They were never your name. And heaven is here in this moment, in this message that you were led to by something you may not have been able to name, but that was absolutely real, to speak your true name back to you. Your true name is carrier. Your true name is chosen. Your true name is the one who was pressed so that the purest and most powerful version of what was always inside could come forward. Your true name is the one the enemy worked hardest to silence, because heaven had already written the loudest chapter for your life. And just as Gideon stood in that winepress with his hands still moving, still doing the work of the hidden season, heaven is looking at you in whatever hidden and compressed place. You have been surviving and calling you by the same kind of name: mighty, valued, chosen, prepared. Gideon's first response to being called a mighty warrior was a question. He asked the angel where all the miracles were that his ancestors had talked about. He asked why everything was going so wrong if God was truly with them. He was essentially saying, "This does not look like favor. This does not feel like chosen. This looks like abandonment, and this feels like losing." And heaven did not rebuke him for asking that question. Heaven did not pull back the calling because Gideon dared to voice his confusion and his grief. Heaven responded to his honest question with a direct and unmistakable commission. "Go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you?" Heaven answered Gideon's doubt, not by explaining the painful years, but by redirecting his gaze toward the assignment. Because sometimes the answer to why this happened is not an explanation but a direction. Sometimes the reason the painful season was allowed is not something that can be understood by looking backward, but only by stepping forward into the thing that the season was preparing you to do. And heaven is doing that with you right now. Heaven is not asking you to fully understand why the loss happened, why the separation came, why the transformation was so costly and so disorienting. Heaven is asking you to step forward into the direction of the calling that all of it was preparing you for. There is something in you that the world needs. Not the version of you that existed before the loss. Not the version of you that had not yet been through the winepress. The world needs the version of you that the pressing produced. The world needs the depth that the wilderness created. The world needs the wisdom that only comes from surviving what you survived and still choosing to remain open, still choosing to keep threshing wheat in the hidden place, still choosing to believe that heaven has not forgotten your name, even when everything in your circumstances seemed to suggest otherwise. Gideon did not know, when he was hiding in that winepress, that the very place of his compression was the last place he would ever need to hide. He did not know that the season of hiddenness was about to end and a season of extraordinary impact was about to begin. He could not see from inside the pit that the angel was already approaching, and you cannot always see from inside the season you are in how close heaven is to appearing and addressing you by your true name. But closeness does not require visibility to be real. And the fact that you have not yet seen the fullness of what is coming does not mean it is not already on its way. You are not in the winepress forever. You were never meant to live there. It was a place of preparation, not a place of permanent residence. And the same God who found Gideon hiding and called him mighty before he felt mighty, that same God found you in this moment, in this message, in this exact place where your journey has brought you, and is speaking the same kind of truth over your life. You are not what the losing season told you that you were. You are what heaven called you before the losing season ever began. And what heaven calls you, nothing in this world has the authority to permanently contradict. The next part of this journey is going to take you deeper into what that opposition has actually been revealing about you, because the intensity of what came against Gideon was not random, and the intensity of what has come against you has not been random either. The opposition did not come because you were weak. That is the lie that the enemy has worked hardest to make you believe. Because if you believe that the attacks came because of your weakness, then you will spend your energy trying to fix yourself rather than stepping into what you were called to carry. The truth that heaven wants to establish in you right now, firmly and without apology, is this: the opposition came because of your strength. The attacks intensified because of your assignment. The resistance you have faced, the relentless and sometimes bewildering pressure that has followed you through seasons when you were just trying to live and breathe and hold things together, was never random. It was targeted. And targeted opposition does not chase ordinary, it chases extraordinary ones. Think about what it takes to mount a sustained campaign against something. Think about what it requires to organize opposition, to coordinate resistance, to keep pressure applied over months and years against a single target. That kind of effort is not wasted on things of little value. Nobody deploys that level of resources against something that poses no threat. And the enemy, who has been far more aware of what is inside you than you have been in your most depleted moments, has never made the mistake of underestimating your assignment, even when you were making that mistake yourself. Every attack that found you was a backhanded declaration of your worth. Every season of resistance was an unwilling testimony to what heaven placed inside you before you were born. Gideon understood this only in retrospect. When he was hiding in the winepress, watching the Midianites sweep through the land for the 7th consecutive year, he was not thinking about his assignment. He was thinking about survival. He was thinking about the gap between what his ancestors had described and what his eyes were seeing every day. He was thinking about the weight of 7 years of loss and the way that weight had compressed something inside him that used to be more open, more hopeful, more willing to believe that the story was going somewhere good. He was not thinking, heaven is allowing this because my assignment is significant enough to require this level of preparation. He was thinking, where is God in all of this? And why does it feel like we have been forgotten? But here is what was happening in the invisible realm during those 7 years that Gideon could not see from inside his pain. The Midianites, without knowing it, were pressing Gideon into the exact shape that his calling required. Every year of loss was deepening his understanding of what it meant to be without. Every season of watching his people suffer was building in him a fire that comfort never could have lit. Every time he hid and survived and got back up and kept going, something being forged in the hidden parts of him that would only become visible when the moment of his commissioning arrived. The enemy was, without any awareness or intention of doing so, cooperating with heaven's preparation process. The opposition was not interrupting Gideon's destiny. It was contributing to it. And the same has been true of everything that has come against you. Every relationship that broke in ways that left you questioning your own judgment. Every opportunity that dissolved before you could grasp it. Every season where the ground shifted beneath you. and you had to learn how to stand on something that would not stop moving. Every attack that came in the night when you were too tired to defend yourself with anything other than the raw decision to simply not let go of heaven entirely. All of it was contributing. None of it was wasted. Not one tear, not one sleepless night, not one moment of sitting in the dark with nothing but the threadbare hope that morning would eventually come. None of it was wasted in the economy of heaven. Because heaven does not waste the experiences of its chosen ones. Heaven does not allow prolonged seasons of pressing without a purpose proportional to the pain. And the purpose proportional to what you have walked through is not small. It is not a minor adjustment to your character or a slight improvement in your patience. The purpose proportional to what you have survived is something that will affect not just your own life, but the lives of everyone who comes into contact with the version of you that the pressing has been producing. You were not pressed for your own sake alone. You were pressed because what comes out of you is needed. What has been concentrated in you through the seasons of loss and separation and transformation is a kind of wisdom, a kind of depth, a kind of unshakable authority that the world is desperately hungry for, and that only the winepress can produce. Gideon was called to lead 300 men against an army of 135,000. Think about those numbers for a moment. 300 against 135,000. By every rational calculation, by every military logic, by every standard of common sense and strategic thinking, that was not a battle. That was a slaughter waiting to happen. And yet heaven not only authorized it, heaven insisted on it. Heaven actually told Gideon to send more men away to reduce his already impossibly small army further, because heaven was not interested in a victory that human strategy could explain. Heaven was interested in a victory that could only be attributed to something beyond human capacity. Heaven was building a testimony through Gideon that would echo through generations, not just because of what happened on the battlefield, but because of the extraordinary gap between what Gideon had and what Gideon was asked to do with it. And heaven is doing the same with you. Heaven is not looking at the gap between what you have and what you have been called to as evidence that you are the wrong person for the assignment. Heaven is looking at that gap as the very space where the miracle will live. The thing that you think disqualifies you, the loss, the limitation, the season of hiddenness, the ways in which you feel you do not measure up to what the calling seems to require, that is not a disqualification. That is a setup. Heaven specializes in using the gaps. Heaven's greatest testimonies are always found in the space between what seemed possible and what actually happened. Psalm 34 verse 18 says, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit." Near to the brokenhearted, not distant from them, not waiting for them to heal before drawing close, near in the breaking, near in the crushing, near in the exact place where the pressing is most intense and the pain is most acute. If you have been walking through a season of brokenness, if the crushing has felt relentless and the pressure has felt like more than any one person should have to carry, then this verse is not a comfort offered from a safe distance. It is a declaration of proximity. Heaven is nearest to you in the places that hurt the most. And what heaven does when it draws near is not simply offer presence. Heaven saves. Heaven restores. Heaven takes what was crushed and brings it back to life in a form more powerful and more purposeful than what existed before the crushing began. Gideon asked heaven a hard question when the angel appeared. He asked why, if God was truly with them, all of this had happened. He did not wrap his confusion in religious language. He did not pretend to feel peace that he did not feel. He brought his raw and honest question directly to the presence of heaven and waited for an answer. And heaven did not turn away from his honesty. Heaven did not respond to his doubt with disappointment or withdrawal. Heaven responded with commission. Heaven responded by calling him forward into something larger than his confusion, something larger than his grief, something larger than the 7 years of accumulating loss that had shaped the question he was asking. Your honest questions have never frightened heaven. Your doubt has never caused heaven to revise the assignment it placed on your life. Your confusion, your grief, your moments of sitting in the dark and asking why this happened and where you go from here. None of that has changed what was written over you before you were born. Heaven has heard every question you have asked in the private places. Heaven has been present for every moment when faith felt like a language you could no longer speak fluently. And heaven's response to all of it has been the same response it gave to Gideon. Not an explanation, but a commission. Not a defense of the painful season, but a declaration that what was placed in you is still there, still whole, still exactly what it was always intended to be. And the time is coming when it will be released in ways that rewrite everything the enemy thought it had established in your story. The attacks that came against you were not the final word. They were never the final word. They were the opening argument of an enemy who does not have the authority to write the ending of your story. Only heaven has that authority, and heaven has already written it. Heaven wrote it before the losses came. Heaven wrote it before the separation happened. Heaven wrote it before the transformation that you did not ask for began to take you apart and put you back together in a shape you did not recognize. And the ending that heaven wrote for your story is not a story of defeat. It is not a story of someone who was pressed too hard and came out broken beyond repair. It is a story of someone who was hidden and compressed and tested and pressed, and who came out carrying something so pure and so powerful that the world will not be able to look at it without being changed. You carry the evidence of heaven's faithfulness in the very survival of your own story. The fact that you are still here, still breathing, still willing to receive this message, still carrying that quiet but unextinguished hunger for something more than what the painful seasons tried to reduce you to, that is not a small thing. That is a testimony that has not finished writing itself yet. And the chapters that are coming, the ones that are even now being arranged in the invisible realm on your behalf, are going to make everything that came before make sense in ways that will leave you breathless. The opposition was never evidence that you were weak or wrong or forgotten. It was always evidence that you were chosen and known and worth the enemy's most sustained effort. And if the enemy thought you were worth that much, imagine what heaven thinks of what is inside you. Imagine what was placed in you that made the opposition so relentless and so persistent and so desperate to keep you hidden in the winepress forever. Whatever it is extraordinary, and it is about to come forward. What has been pressed out of you through every season of loss and opposition is not just resilience. It is not just the quiet dignity of someone who survived what tried to destroy them. What has been pressed out of you is something far more specific, far more measurable, and far more extraordinary than mere endurance. And in this part of the journey together, heaven wants to draw your attention to something that science has only recently begun to understand, something that spiritual tradition has known for centuries, something that connects the invisible truth of who you are with the very physical architecture of the mind that heaven placed inside your body. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency. That is not a metaphor. That is not poetic language dressed up to sound profound. Researchers who have spent decades studying the human brain have identified that the minds of people who operate at the highest levels of creativity, intuition, problem-solving, and what can only be described as breakthrough thinking, those minds share a measurable electrical signature. They call it gamma. And the people who access it most consistently are not always the ones with the most education or the most favorable circumstances. They are often the ones who have been through the most. They are often the ones who have been pressed, who have survived seasons of loss, who have had everything that was not essential stripped away until what remained was the most concentrated and most powerful version of what was always there. The pressure did not just build your character. It literally rewired the frequency at which your mind was designed to operate. This is where Gideon's story takes on a dimension that his generation did not have language for, but that heaven always understood. When Gideon was hiding in that winepress, his mind was not idle. Under that kind of sustained pressure, under years of watching his people lose everything and feeling the weight of helplessness and the hunger for a solution that had not yet arrived, his brain was doing something extraordinary. It was being prepared. The same way that intense pressure over time transforms carbon into diamond, the sustained compression of those 7 years was creating in Gideon's mind a readiness, a sharpness, a capacity for decisive action and clear vision that a life of comfort and ease never could have produced. When the angel called him mighty warrior, it was not wishful thinking. It was an accurate assessment of what the winepress had actually built inside him. And what the winepress has built inside you is equally real, equally measurable, equally extraordinary. But here is something important that heaven wants you to understand. The preparation that the difficult seasons have done in you can be accelerated, supported, and activated in ways that most people are never shown. And this is where a discovery made by a neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers becomes directly relevant to your journey as a chosen one. Dr. James Rivers spent more than 30 years of his professional life studying the human brain. Trained at MIT and connected through his research to programs developed in collaboration with NASA, Dr. Rivers dedicated decades to understanding one central question. Why do some people operate at extraordinary levels of cognitive and creative capacity while others, equally intelligent and equally capable by every standard measure, seem unable to access that same level of function? What he discovered after thousands of days of research and analysis was not a difference in raw intelligence. It was a difference in brainwave frequency. Specifically, it was the presence or absence of two particular types of brain activity, theta waves and gamma waves, and the relationship between them. Theta waves, which operate at a frequency of 4 to 8 cycles per second, are the brain waves most associated with deep creativity, accelerated learning, and the kind of intuitive knowing that chosen ones often describe as a sense that something is true before they can fully explain why. Theta is the frequency of the dreamer, the visionary, the person who sees solutions where others see only problems. It is the frequency that children operate in naturally, which is why children learn so rapidly and imagine so freely. And it is the frequency that most adults, under the weight of stress and loss and the relentless pressure of survival, gradually lose access to as they move through life. Gamma waves operate at an even higher frequency and are associated with what researchers describe as peak cognitive performance, the moments of sudden clarity and breakthrough insight that feel almost like a gift arriving from outside yourself. Gamma is the frequency of the eureka moment. It is the frequency of the sudden solution, the unexpected creative leap, the moment when everything that was fragmented comes together into a coherent and brilliant whole. It is what athletes describe as being in the zone, what artists describe as being in flow, what spiritual leaders throughout history have described in language that science is only now catching up to. What Dr. Rivers discovered was that the brain can be guided into these states through a process called brainwave entrainment. The brain, he found, has a natural tendency to synchronize with rhythmic external stimuli. When specific audio frequencies, delivered through carefully engineered sound, are introduced to the brain through the ears, the brain follows. It does not require effort or training or years of meditation practice. It simply responds to the frequency it is given, the way a tuning fork responds to a matching tone. And when the brain is guided into theta and gamma states through this process, the results that Dr. Rivers and his research team documented were not subtle. They were profound, consistent, and reproducible across thousands of subjects. The product that emerged from this research is called the Genius Wave. It is a 7-minute audio experience, engineered with the precision of 30 years of neuroscientific research that guides your brain into the exact frequency states associated with creative breakthrough, accelerated learning, heightened intuition, and the kind of clear, expansive thinking that most people only access accidentally and briefly. 7 minutes, not an hour of meditation, not years of training, not a regimen of supplements or devices or interventions. 7 minutes of specific, precisely calibrated sound, and your brain begins to do what it was always designed to do, but has been prevented from doing by the accumulated weight of stress and loss, and the relentless pressure of difficult seasons. And here is why this matters specifically for you, chosen one. The seasons you have walked through, the loss, the separation, the transformation, the pressing, have already done much of the work of clearing away what was not essential. They have already stripped from you the things that were blocking access to the deepest and most powerful parts of your design. The Genius Wave is not creating something new in you. It is activating what the winepress already prepared. It is opening the door to the frequency that was always yours, but that the weight of survival may have temporarily buried. The people who have used this tool carry stories that sound, in many ways, like versions of the story you have been living. A woman who spent 14 months unable to sleep properly after a devastating loss, who listened to the 7-minute audio and slept through the night for the first time since the loss occurred, and who received the call the following Monday that she had been waiting an entire year to receive. A man who had been trying to solve a problem in his professional life for months, who after 3 weeks of daily 7-minute sessions found the solution arriving with a clarity and completeness that he described as arriving from somewhere outside his own thinking. More than 19,000 people have now used the Genius Wave, and the return sits below 4%. That number is not a marketing figure. That number is the sound of people finding what they came looking for. I know that some of you hearing this right now are thinking, $39 is not nothing, and you are right. It is not nothing. That thought is valid, and it deserves to be acknowledged rather than dismissed. You have been in seasons where every dollar had to be accounted for, where investing in yourself felt like a luxury that your circumstances did not yet permit. That experience is real, and it is honored here. And I want you to hold that thought alongside this one. The Genius Wave normally sells for $49. Through the link in the pinned comment, it is available today for just $39. And every purchase is backed by a 90-day money-back guarantee. Not 30 days, 90 days. That is 3 full months to experience what this tool does in your life. And if at any point in those 3 months you feel that it has not delivered what was promised, You receive every dollar back without question or argument. There is only one place to access the Genius Wave at this price. That is the link in the pinned comment and in the description below this video. There are imitations circulating in other places, products that use similar language but do not carry the precision of the original research. Do not purchase from any other source. The link below is the only verified and protected point of access, and what you receive through that link is the direct result of more than 30 years of research by one of the most credentialed neuroscientists working in this field. This offer is not permanent. The price available through the pinned link is a time-limited opportunity, and the number of people who can access it at this price point is finite. Heaven has already been doing the work of preparation in you. The 7-minute audio that Dr. Rivers spent 30 years developing is not a substitute for that preparation. It is a key that fits the lock that the preparation created. And the door that opens when those two things meet is one that leads somewhere your journey has been moving toward for longer than you have known. You have already done the hard work of the wine press. What comes next requires something much simpler: 7 minutes. And what those 7 minutes unlock in you may be the very thing that makes everything else you have been pressing through finally make the kind of sense that changes everything going forward. There is something that needs to be said before we go any further into what heaven has prepared for you. And it needs to be said gently and honestly, the way that truth is always most powerful, when it arrives not as a demand but as an invitation. Everything you just received about the frequency of your mind, about the science that confirms what heaven always knew about the architecture it placed inside you, that was not a detour from the spiritual journey you are on. That was a deeper layer of it. Because heaven has never been interested in separating what it made from how it made it. The same God who called Gideon out of the winepress is the same God who designed the neurons in your brain to respond to frequency. The same divine intelligence that wrote your assignment before you were born also wrote the operating instructions for the mind it gave you to carry that assignment out. Science and spirit are not in opposition in the economy of heaven. They are both languages that describe the same extraordinary and intentional design. And now, as the science settles into its place in your understanding, and you begin to feel the integration of what was just offered to you, there is something else that heaven wants to address, something that the science cannot fully reach, but that the spirit touches with a precision that nothing else can match. It is the question of what happens in the silence. Not the silence of the winepress, not the silence of hiding, but the deeper silence that comes after the most intense seasons of pressing are over, and you find yourself standing in a space that is neither the old life nor the new one, the in-between space, the liminal place, the wilderness that exists not at the beginning of the journey, but in the middle of it, after the angel has appeared and spoken, but before the army has been gathered and the battle has been won. Gideon knew that silence. After the angel departed and the commission had been spoken over him, Gideon did not immediately stride out into the landscape with confidence and certainty. He asked for a sign, and then, when the sign was given, he asked for another one. He set out a fleece and asked heaven to confirm what heaven had already clearly said. And he did this not once but twice, with the conditions reversed the second time: wet fleece and dry ground, dry fleece and wet ground, as if one confirmation was not quite enough to carry him all the way through his own doubt. And heaven, in extraordinary patience and grace, honored both requests. Heaven did not withdraw the calling because Gideon needed more than one sign. Heaven did not revise the assignment because the man chosen to carry it needed time to let the truth of his own identity settle into his bones before he could act on it. If you have ever asked heaven for a sign and then, when the sign came, found yourself needing another one, you are not weak. You are not faithless. You are human, in the most honest and recognizable sense of that word, and you are in very good company. The asking of Gideon was not a failure of his character. It was the honest expression of a man who had been in the winepress long enough that the idea of his own might have become genuinely difficult to hold without support. The weight of what heaven was asking him to believe about himself was heavier than the weight of the mission itself. Because sometimes the hardest thing that heaven asks of us is not to do something extraordinary, but to believe something extraordinary about who we are while we are still standing in the ordinary and painful reality of where we have been. That is where you are right now, standing between the angel's declaration and the battlefield's proof. Standing in the space where the word has been spoken over your life, but the evidence in the natural realm has not yet fully aligned with what was said in the spirit. And that space, that liminal and sometimes agonizing space between the promise and the fulfillment, is not a sign that the promise was wrong, or that you misheard, or that heaven has changed its mind about you. That space is where the roots go down. That space is where the thing that was spoken over you moves from being something you heard into something you know. And there is a difference between hearing a truth and knowing it that can only be bridged by time spent holding it in the silence. Psalm 46 verse 10 says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." Be still and know. Not be still and understand. Not be still and figure out. Not be still and resolve every question and satisfy every doubt before you allow yourself to move forward. Be still and know. Knowing, in the language of heaven, is not primarily a cognitive event. It is not something that happens in the part of you that analyzes and reasons and weighs evidence. Knowing, in the deepest and most transformative sense, is something that happens in the part of you that is most essentially you, the part that existed before the losses shaped you, the part that the winepress could compress but could not destroy, the part that the enemy targeted with such sustained intensity, precisely because it was the part that carried the most potent version of your assignment. The wilderness that Gideon moved through between his commissioning and his victory was not empty time. It was loaded time. It was the time during which he dismantled the altar of Baal that stood in his own father's household, a deeply personal and costly act of obedience that had nothing to do with the battlefield and everything to do with the internal alignment that the battle would require. Before he could face the army of 135,000, he had to face something in his own inheritance, something that had been standing in the wrong place for longer than he had been alive, something that needed to come down before what heaven was building could go up in its place. And there is something in that detail that is worth sitting with in the silence of this moment, because many chosen ones are waiting for the external battle to begin, while heaven is waiting for an internal altar to come down. Many people who carry genuine callings are standing at the edge of the battlefield looking outward for the enemy, while heaven is quietly pointing to something closer, something within the inherited landscape of their own story, a pattern, a belief, a way of seeing themselves that was put in place long before they had any say in the matter, and that has been standing in the wrong position ever since. Heaven is not asking you to tear yourself apart. Heaven is asking you to let go of the thing that was never truly yours, the false altar, the inherited limitation, the story that someone else built about your identity that you have been maintaining without fully realizing it was never the truth. Gideon tore down that altar at night because he was afraid of his father's household and the men of the town. He did the right thing in secret, in the dark, before anyone could see him doing it, and heaven counted that midnight act of courage as fully as it would have counted a public declaration made in broad daylight. Because heaven does not grade obedience on the basis of how visible it is. Heaven sees the midnight altar that you tear down in the private places of your own heart, just as clearly as it sees the public declarations made on stages before crowds. The hidden acts of courage are not smaller than the visible ones. They are often the most significant ones, because they happen in the place where no one is watching except heaven, and they require a quality of trust and obedience that the presence of an audience can sometimes substitute for but can never replace. You have been tearing down altars in the midnight places for longer than anyone has known. You have been doing the private work of releasing things that needed to go, of letting the painful seasons teach you what they came to teach, rather than simply surviving them with bitterness, of choosing again and again to keep your face turned toward heaven even in the seasons when heaven's face felt turned away. That midnight work has not been invisible. It has been seen, recorded, and honored in the courts of heaven with a precision and a thoroughness that you will not fully understand until you are standing on the other side of the season you are currently in. The silence between the promise and the fulfillment is not wasted time. It is not a delay in the calendar of heaven caused by something you did wrong or something you failed to do. It is the time during which the roots of what was spoken over you go deep enough to hold the weight of what is coming. Trees that grow quickly in easy conditions often fall in the first significant storm. Trees that grow slowly, under conditions of difficulty, under the need to push roots down deeper in search of water and stability. Those trees are the ones that remain standing when everything around them is moving. Heaven is growing something in you that is meant to remain, and the depth of the root system that the difficult seasons have been building in you is proportional to the height of what you are about to carry. Gideon's army of 300 carried torches inside clay jars. They carried light inside earthen vessels, hidden until the exact moment when the covering was broken and the light was released all at once in a darkness that had no answer for it. The enemy heard the sound and saw the light and fell into confusion so complete that they turned on each other. The battle was won not by the strength of 300 warriors, but by the release of hidden light at the appointed moment, by the willingness of broken vessels to carry something luminous to the edge of the darkness, and then let it out. You are a vessel. You have been carrying something luminous through seasons that required it to remain hidden. The clay of your humanity has been shaped by the pressing, refined by the heat, made more suitable as a container for what was placed inside you by the very processes that felt like they were diminishing you. And the appointed moment, the moment when the covering breaks and what has been hidden inside you is released into the darkness around you, that moment is closer than it has ever been. The silence you are sitting in right now is not the silence of abandonment. It is the silence of the moment just before the torches are raised, just before the jars are broken, just before the darkness encounters the light it has no power to extinguish. Stay in the stillness. Let the knowing settle. Let the roots go down one more layer into the truth of who you are and what was placed inside you, and why the opposition was so sustained, and why the winepress lasted as long as it did. Because what comes forward from this place of deep rootedness is not going to be something that the next storm can topple. It is going to be something that was built to last, built to shine, built to carry the weight of an assignment that was written in heaven long before the earth knew your name. The wilderness between the promise and the fulfillment is almost behind you. And what lies ahead of that wilderness is not just your own breakthrough. It is the beginning of everything that the breakthrough makes possible for the lives that yours was always meant to touch. You have been walking through something in this message that goes beyond information. You have not simply been receiving words arranged into sentences. You have been receiving something that was carried here with intentionality and care. Something that required more than skill to put together. Something that required the kind of listening that only happens when the one delivering the message has also spent time in the winepress, has also known what it means to press forward through seasons that offered very little visible evidence that pressing forward was worth the effort. And if what you have been hearing has been landing in you the way that truth lands when it finds the exact place it was written for, then what happens next in this conversation matters more than it might appear on the surface. Because this message does not exist in isolation. It did not arrive to you from a place of abundance and ease, where the work of creating it costs nothing and requires nothing, and is sustained by invisible and effortless forces that need no support to keep moving. This message exists because someone made a decision, again and again, in seasons that were not always easy, to keep showing up to the work of gathering words that might reach the person who needed them most, to keep building a space where chosen ones who feel unseen and unheard and pressed beyond what they thought they could carry might find, even for a few minutes, a voice that speaks their true name back to them. That work is real. It has weight. It has cost. And it continues because of the people who decide that what they found here was worth passing forward. Gideon, after the midnight altar was torn down and the commission was fully received in his spirit, did not go to war alone. He sent out a call. He sounded a trumpet and gathered the people who were meant to stand beside him in the moment that heaven had appointed. He understood, even before the battle strategy was revealed, that some things are not meant to be done in isolation. Some assignments are too large for a single pair of hands, too significant for a single voice, too weighty for a single vessel to carry without others standing alongside it. The gathering of the 300 was not an afterthought. It was essential. It was part of the design. And the 300 who answered the call were not random. They were chosen. They were the ones who, when they came to the water, kept their eyes up. They remained watchful, even in a moment of refreshment and ease. They were the ones who had not let their guard down, who had not surrendered their alertness to the comfort of the moment. The people who are in this space right now, the ones who have stayed through every section of this message, who did not leave when the message got specific about the wine press, or when it got personal about the altars in the midnight places. Those people are not here by accident. You are the 300. You are the ones who kept your eyes up, even at the water. You are the ones whose alertness, whose hunger, whose refusal to be fully satisfied by the surface-level things that the world keeps, offering as substitutes for genuine depth. That quality is exactly what this gathering requires, and the gathering is only as powerful as the people who decide to remain in it and to call others into it with them. So here is what I am asking you to do right now, and I am asking it not as a transaction, but as an act of participation in something that is larger than any single moment of this message. If what you have heard today has reached you in the way that truth reaches when it finds its mark, if something in you has been moved, stirred, recognized, or spoken to in a way that you have been needing for longer than you may have consciously realized, then do not let that be the end of the story for someone else who needed to hear this and has not found it yet. Like this video. Not because a number on a screen matters in the grand scheme of what heaven is doing, but because that simple act tells the invisible architecture of the platform that this content is worth showing to more people, and more people means more chosen ones who are sitting in their own version of the wine press right now, not knowing that a message was already being prepared for exactly where they are. Your single act of pressing a button becomes a part of the chain that reaches the person who is at the end of their endurance tonight, and who needs to hear that the wine press is not where their story ends. Share this message. Send it to the person who came to your mind while you were listening. You know who that is. There is someone, and you have already thought of them, who is in a season right now that mirrors something you have walked through, who is pressing forward with very little visible evidence that it is worth it, who is hiding in their own version of the winepress and threshing wheat in secret because they cannot figure out any other way to keep going. That person does not need a solution from you. They do not need advice or strategy or a carefully crafted message explaining what they should do differently. They need to know that heaven sees them. They need to hear their true name spoken back to them. Send them this. Let the message do what it was designed to do in the life of someone who is ready to receive it. Subscribe if you have not already done so. Not because a subscriber count defines the value of what is being built here, but because subscribing means that the next time heaven lays something heavy and specific and necessary on this channel, you will be among the first to receive it. The messages that are coming are not going to be less significant than what I heard today. They are going to be more so because every message builds on the foundation of the one before it. And the foundation that has been laid in you through this conversation is strong enough to carry considerably more weight. Stay connected. Stay in the gathering. Be one of the 300 who did not drift away when the moment of refreshment passed and the call to something more demanding began. And for those of you who have found consistent value in this space, who return here because something about what is built here meets a need that other places do not meet in quite the same way, there is a link in the description and in the pinned comment where you can support this work through a donation. Every contribution, regardless of its size, is received with genuine gratitude and is understood for what it actually is, which is not a financial transaction, but a partnership. It is your way of saying that you believe this work matters enough to help sustain it, that the chosen ones who have not yet found this space deserve to find it, and that you are willing to be part of what makes that possible. Nothing is required, nothing is expected. But if the Spirit moves you in that direction, the link is there and the gratitude is real. Because here is what this channel is ultimately about. It is not about a voice speaking into a camera. It is not about production quality or viewing numbers, or the metrics that platforms use to measure significance. It is about the person in the wine press who finds this at 3 in the morning and hears, for the first time in a long time, something that sounds like their true name. It is about the chosen one who has been told by their circumstances that the pressing means they are failing, who lands here and discovers that the pressing means they are being prepared. It is about the mother who has not slept properly in months, because the grief of a lost season is sitting on her chest at every quiet moment, who presses play on something she almost did not click on and finds that the words meet her exactly where she is. It is about the man who has been hiding his own winepress from everyone around him, performing wholeness in public while quietly asking heaven in private whether the call he once felt so clearly was ever real, who hears Gideon's story and recognizes something in it that he thought he had lost. Those people are real. They are in this space right now. You may be one of them, and every person who likes and shares and subscribes and supports is participating in the work of making sure that the next person who needs this finds it before their endurance runs out. That is not a small thing. That is not a casual contribution to a content creator's vanity metrics. That is participation in something that heaven is using to reach its chosen ones in a moment when chosen ones are under more pressure than perhaps any previous generation has faced. When the voices telling them that they are ordinary and replaceable and wrong and too broken to be used are louder and more persistent and more algorithmically amplified than ever before. Your participation is a form of resistance. Your like is a declaration that truth should travel further than noise. Your share is an act of generosity toward someone you may never meet, but whose life may be genuinely altered by the 7 minutes they spend listening to what you passed forward to them. Your subscription is a covenant that you intend to stay in the gathering, to keep your eyes up at the water, to remain one of the 300 who were chosen not because they were the strongest or the most impressive, but because they were the most watchful. Gideon's 300 did not win the battle through conventional means. They won it by being willing to stand in the dark holding hidden light, waiting for the appointed moment, and then releasing it all at once into a darkness that had no answer for it. That is what this gathering is doing. Hidden light, carried by people who have been through the winepress, waiting for the appointed moment, standing in the dark together and refusing to let the torches go out. You are one of those people, and the light you are carrying is far more significant than the season you have been surviving has allowed you to see. Stay in the gathering, pass it forward. The darkness has no answer for what is being carried here. Everything that has been spoken over you in this message has been moving toward a single point of convergence. Not a conclusion, not an ending, but an arrival. The kind of arrival that does not announce itself with noise and spectacle, but that settles into you quietly and completely. The way that dawn does not argue with the darkness but simply appears, and the darkness has no choice but to give way. You have been moving toward this arrival for longer than this message has been speaking. You have been moving toward it through every season of loss, through every night in the winepress, through every midnight altar that you tore down when no one was watching, through every moment when you chose, at significant cost to your own comfort and certainty, to keep your face turned in the direction of heaven, even when heaven felt impossibly far away. And Gideon, whose story has been woven through this message like a thread of gold through a fabric of considerable weight and darkness, Gideon also had a moment of arrival. Not the moment of the battle, not the moment of the victory, but the moment before both, the moment that made both possible. It was the moment when heaven asked him to do something that made no rational sense whatsoever, and he did it anyway. Heaven told him to reduce his army. Heaven told him that the 22,000 men who had answered his call were too many, that the 10,000 who remained after the first reduction were still too many, and that the 300 who were finally selected were exactly enough. Enough for what heaven was planning, not enough for what human strategy could have designed. And Gideon obeyed. That is the word that deserves to sit in the center of this section and be looked at directly, without softening and without rushing past it. He obeyed, not because it made sense, not because he could see the mechanism by which 300 would overcome 135,000, not because his fear had dissolved or his doubt had been fully resolved, or his understanding had finally caught up with what heaven was asking. He obeyed in the presence of all of those things, fear and doubt and incomplete understanding. And he obeyed anyway. And that quality, that willingness to move forward in obedience before the outcome is visible, is the single most defining characteristic of every chosen one who has ever stepped from the winepress into the fullness of their assignment. Obedience before clarity. That is the threshold. That is the place where many chosen ones stop, not because they have stopped believing, not because the calling has gone silent, but because they are waiting for the plan to make sense before they take the next step. They are waiting for the fear to subside. They are waiting for the circumstances to align in a way that makes the obedience feel less like a leap and more like a logical progression. And heaven understands that waiting. Heaven is patient with it. But heaven also knows that the alignment the chosen one is waiting for will not come before the obedience. It comes through it. The path does not become clear and then invite you to walk on it. The path becomes clear under your feet as you walk, and only under your feet as you walk, and not a moment before. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 8 says, "By faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going." Not knowing where he was going. That is the condition under which the great movements of heaven have always been initiated. Not knowing where he was going and going anyway. Not having the full picture and moving toward the part of the picture that was visible. Not feeling ready and choosing to walk in the direction of the calling because the calling was louder than the fear, because the pull of what heaven had spoken was stronger than the push of what the circumstances were saying. Abraham left. Everything familiar, not because he had a detailed itinerary of where he was headed, but because the one who called him was trustworthy enough to follow into the unknown. That is the invitation that heaven is extending to you in this moment. Not an invitation to have it all figured out. Not an invitation to feel completely certain and unafraid and fully prepared for everything that the next season will require. The invitation is simpler than that and more demanding than that simultaneously. It is an invitation to go, to move in the direction that heaven has been pointing, not when the fear disappears, not when the circumstances align, not when the picture becomes fully clear, but now, in this exact condition, with everything that is uncertain still uncertain, and everything that is unresolved still unresolved, and with the knowledge that the God who found Gideon in the winepress and called him mighty before he felt mighty is the same God who is speaking over your life in this moment and calling you by the name that the difficult seasons tried to take from you. Gideon stood on the hill above the Midianite camp the night before the battle, and heaven told him to go down and listen to what the enemy was saying. And when he went down and pressed close enough to hear, he heard a Midianite soldier telling a dream to his companion, a dream about a loaf of barley bread tumbling into the camp and collapsing the tent, and the companion interpreted the dream immediately and without hesitation. This is nothing other than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. Into his hand, God has given Midian and all the camp. The enemy was dreaming about Gideon's victory before Gideon himself was fully convinced of it. The enemy's subconscious was already processing the inevitability of what heaven had decreed before the man heaven had chosen had fully settled into the certainty of his own calling. Think about that for a moment and let it land in the part of you that has been most resistant to believing what heaven has been saying about you. The enemy already knows the outcome. The forces that have been working against you, the opposition that has been so persistent and so targeted and so relentless. They are not operating from a position of confidence. They are operating from a position of desperate preemption. They are working so hard against you because they have already seen what happens when you step fully into what you were made for, and they are trying with everything available to them to prevent that stepping. But the dream has already been dreamed. The outcome has already been accomplished in the courts of heaven. And all that remains is for you to go back up the hill, worship, and give the order to move. That is what Gideon did when he heard the dream and its interpretation. The scripture says he bowed in worship, not in relief, not in triumphant celebration, but in worship. In the acknowledgement that what was about to happen was not his to take credit for, that the victory already decreed in heaven was a gift and not an achievement, that the right response to the revelation of what God had already decided was not pride or self-congratulation, but the bowing of the head and the opening of the hands and the recognition that all of it, the calling, the preparation, the commission, the victory, all of it originated from a source that was infinitely beyond himself. And then he gave the order. He went back to the camp and told the 300, "Arise, for the Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hand. Not the Lord might give it. Not the Lord is considering giving it. Not if everything goes according to plan and conditions are favorable. The Lord may deliver it. The Lord has given." Past tense. Already done in the realm of heaven. Already sealed in the place where outcomes are determined before they manifest, in the place where human eyes can see them. Gideon spoke about the victory in the past tense, before a single torch had been raised or a single jar had been broken, because he understood that what heaven has decreed does not require the natural realm to confirm it before it is real. That is the posture that heaven is inviting you into right now. Not the posture of waiting for the victory to become visible before you speak of it as certain. Not the posture of holding the promise loosely until the circumstances give you permission to hold it firmly. The posture of the one who has heard the decree of heaven and has bowed in worship and has risen from that worship to speak of what has been decided as already done. Because in the courts of heaven, it already is. The crown that has your name on it was not placed there after you proved yourself worthy of it. It was placed there before the winepress began. It was held in trust through every season of loss and separation and transformation. Never at risk, never in danger of being given to someone else, never contingent on your performance or your feelings or your ability to maintain perfect faith through the most difficult chapters of your story. The crown was always yours. The victory was always decreed. The enemy has already dreamed the dream that reveals the outcome. And you, chosen one, are being called to rise from the place of worship and give the order. Not because the circumstances have finally aligned, not because the fear has finally dissolved, but because what heaven has already decided is more real and more permanent than anything the natural realm has said to you in any of the seasons that tried to convince you otherwise. What comes next is going to ask something of you. It is going to ask you to move before you feel fully ready. It is going to ask you to speak the decree before the evidence fully supports it. It is going to ask you to raise the torch and break the jar and let the hidden light out into the darkness around you. Not when it is safe and certain and comfortable, but precisely when it is not, because that is the moment when the darkness has no answer for what is released. You have been carrying the torch through the winepress. You have been keeping it lit through every season that tried to extinguish it. And the hill is behind you now. The camp is below. The decree has been spoken over you. And the only thing that remains is for you to arise. You have come a long way in this message, not just through the sections that have been spoken, not just through the story of Gideon moving from the winepress to the hill above the enemy camp, but through something that has been happening in you simultaneously, something that has been shifting in the invisible architecture of who you are, as the words have been landing and the truth has been settling, and the weight of what heaven has spoken over your life has been finding its place in the deepest parts of your understanding. You have been changing while you have been listening. That not is a small thing. That is actually one of the most significant things that can happen to a human being. The quiet, unannounced internal reorganization that occurs when truth finds the exact place in a person that it was written for and settles there with a permanence that comfort and convenience could never have produced. And now there is something that heaven wants to address directly, something that chosen ones carry into every season and every battle and every moment of commissioning, and that, if it is not named and confronted and placed in its proper position, has the capacity to undermine even the most genuine and deeply rooted calling. It is the question of protection. Not protection in the abstract, not protection as a theological concept to be discussed and analyzed and held at a comfortable distance, but protection as a lived and pressing reality for someone who has already been through enough to that the opposition is real, the attacks not imaginary, that the enemy who has been targeting their assignment is not a metaphor but an actual force that moves through actual circumstances and causes actual damage to actual lives. Gideon understood this. After the victory over the Midianites, after the torches blazed and the jars shattered and the enemy camp fell into confusion, and the decree of heaven was fulfilled in the visible realm in ways that left no rational explanation available other than the intervention of something far beyond human strategy, Gideon still had to deal with the aftermath. Victory in one season does not mean the permanent disappearance of opposition. It means the establishment of something that the enemy will attempt to recover from and respond to. And the chosen one, who has just stepped into a new level of their calling, is often more targeted in the season immediately following their breakthrough than they were in any previous season, because the enemy understands, even if the chosen one does not yet fully grasp it, that what was just released into the world through that breakthrough is genuinely dangerous to everything that opposes the kingdom of heaven. So heaven wants to speak to you right now about the armor that surrounds you, not the armor that you have earned through your performance or maintained through your perfection or qualified for through seasons of unbroken faith and unshaken certainty. The armor that heaven places around its chosen ones is not contingent on any of those things. It is placed there by virtue of the calling itself, by the decision that was made in heaven before your birth, that you would be assigned to carry something of significance into this world, and by the faithfulness of the one who made that decision to protect what he commissioned. Think about what Gideon's 300 carried into the darkness that night. Torches, yes. Jars, yes. Trumpets, yes. But what they were actually carrying, underneath all of those physical elements, was the seal of heaven on their assignment. They were carrying the knowledge, received from the dream overheard in the enemy camp, and from the worship that followed, that what was about to happen had already been decided somewhere beyond the reach of the enemy's interference. And that knowledge, that settled certainty that the decree had already been issued and the outcome already sealed, that was the most powerful thing they carried into the darkness. Not because it made them physically invulnerable, but because it made them spiritually unshakable. And unshakable people who have heard the dream and bowed in worship and risen to give the order, are extraordinarily difficult for the enemy to stop. You carry that same seal. The assignment that was placed on your life before your birth carries with it the protection of the one who placed it there. Every attack that has come against you has had to pass through that covering to reach you. And the fact that you are still here, still breathing, still carrying the torch, still capable of receiving this message and letting it land in the deep places, is evidence that the covering has been doing its work, even in the seasons when you could not feel it and could not see it, and could not find any rational basis for believing it was there. You survived what you survived, not only because of your own resilience, extraordinary as that resilience has been. You survived it because something was holding over you that the opposition could not remove. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 verse 3 says, "But the Lord is faithful. He will establish you and guard you against the evil one." Establish you and guard you. Both. Not just guard, not just protection from what is coming, but establishment. The setting of your feet on ground that does not shift under the pressure of opposition. The rooting of your identity in something so far below. The reach of circumstance that the storms which move everything on the surface cannot touch what is anchored at the deepest level. Heaven is not simply defending you from attack. Heaven is simultaneously building something in you and around you that the attack cannot reach, that the opposition cannot access, that the enemy, for all the sustained intensity of its campaign against your calling, cannot penetrate or permanently damage or ultimately destroy. The chosen ones who have walked this path before you, who have sat in their own versions of the winepress and been called from their own places of hiddenness and stood on their own hills above enemy camps and heard the dreams that confirmed the decrees. Every one of them passed through seasons when the protection felt invisible and the opposition felt overwhelming, and the gap between what heaven had spoken and what the circumstances were showing was so wide that crossing it seemed impossible. And every one of them discovered on the other side of the crossing that the covering had been there the entire time. That what felt like abandonment was actually preparation. That what felt like exposure was actually the thinning of everything that was not essential, so that what was essential could become more visible and more powerful. You are guarded, you are established, you are sealed by the calling, and covered by the faithfulness of the one who issued it. That is not a sentiment. That is a declaration rooted in the character of a God who does not commission what he does not protect, and does not call forward what he does not cover, and does not send into the darkness without first placing around the sent one everything that the darkness cannot overcome. And now, in this moment, after everything that has been spoken and received and settled in you through this message, heaven is asking you to do something that will mark this moment as a point of decision rather than simply a point of information. It is asking you to take what has been spoken over you and make it yours. Not just something you heard in a message, but something you claimed, something you put your name on, something you stepped forward to receive with both hands open and both feet. Planted in the truth of what heaven has declared about who you are and what you carry and what you are protected by. So right now, in the comments below, I want you to type these 4 words. I am still standing, not as a casual response to content, not as a reflexive engagement with a platform, but as a declaration, as your agreement with everything that heaven has spoken over you in this message. As your acknowledgement that the winepress did not finish you, that the opposition did not define you, that the losses did not have the final word over your life, and that you are here right now, in this moment, still standing on ground that heaven has established beneath your feet and covered above your head, with a faithfulness that does not waver and does not withdraw and does not revise itself based on the severity of what came against you. I am still standing. Those 4 words typed into the comment section right now are your stake in the ground. They are your declaration to every force that has tried to convince you that the pressing was permanent and the hiding was your destiny, and the losses were the end of the story. They are your agreement with Gideon, who stood in the winepress and kept threshing wheat. They are your agreement with Abraham, who went out not knowing where he was going. They are your agreement with every chosen one who has ever stood between the promise and the fulfillment and decided, in that narrow and demanding space, to keep standing. Because standing is not passive. Standing, for a chosen one who has been through what you have been through, is one of the most active and costly and significant things a human being can do. Standing means you have not been moved from the ground that heaven established beneath you. Standing means the torch is still lit. Standing means the jar is intact and waiting for the appointed moment of release. Standing means that whatever the opposition threw at you, and whatever the seasons took from you, and whatever the transformation cost you, you are still here, still carrying what was placed inside you before. You were born, still available to heaven for the assignment that was written over your life before the first difficult chapter ever began. Type it now. I am still standing. Let those words go out from you as a declaration and a prayer and a testimony and a war cry all at once. Let them reach heaven as the sound of a chosen one who was pressed but not destroyed, hidden but not forgotten, attacked but not defeated, and who is rising now from the place of worship, just as Gideon rose, to step into everything that the decree of heaven has already established on their behalf. The seal is on you. The covering is real. And what heaven has established beneath your feet, nothing that has come against you, nothing that is coming, and nothing that the enemy can yet devise, has the authority to remove. You are still standing, and heaven is standing with you. There is a moment in every chosen one's journey that does not look like a turning point from the outside. It does not arrive with fanfare or visible signs or the kind of dramatic shift in circumstances that would make it easy to identify as the moment when everything changed. It arrives quietly. It arrives in the middle of an ordinary day or an unremarkable evening or a moment so simple and unannounced that the one experiencing it might almost miss it entirely if they were not paying attention. With the deepest and most honest part of themselves, it arrives as a settling, a quieting, a sense that something that has been in motion for a very long time has finally found its resting place. Not the resting place of resignation or exhaustion, not the stillness of someone who has simply run out of the energy to keep fighting, but the resting place of someone who has arrived, someone who has come through the long corridor and stepped out the other side, and is standing now in a landscape that is different from everything the difficult seasons contain. You are standing in that landscape right now, not fully perhaps, not with every question answered, and every wound healed and every loss restored and every uncertainty resolved, but in the most essential and most permanent sense, you are standing in it. Because the landscape that matters most is not the one that exists in your circumstances. It is the one that exists in your identity. And your identity, the one that heaven spoke over you before the first difficult season began, the one that Gideon heard called out over him in the winepress by the voice of the angel, the one that the opposition has spent such extraordinary energy trying to obscure and overwrite and replace, with something smaller and more manageable and less threatening to the plans of darkness. That identity has not changed. It has not been diminished by what you lost. It has not been reduced by the seasons of hiddenness. It has not been altered by the transformation that felt more like destruction than construction while you were inside it. It has been refined. It has been concentrated. It has been made more essentially and more powerfully itself by every single thing that tried to make it less. And that is the truth that heaven wants to land in you in this section with a completeness and a permanence that carries you forward from this moment into everything that is coming. Not as information you received in a message, but as knowledge you carry in the deepest place of your own being. Gideon's story does not end with the battle. The battle was extraordinary, yes. The torches, and the jars, and the 300 and the 135,000, and the decree fulfilled in the darkness in a way that left no room for human explanation. All of that was real and significant, and worth the weight of wonder that it deserves. But what came after the battle was, in its own quieter way, equally significant. Because what came after the battle was the living, the inhabiting of the identity that had been spoken over him in the winepress, and confirmed on the hill and sealed in the victory, the daily reality of being that heaven called him to be, not in a single dramatic moment, but in the accumulation of ordinary moments that followed the extraordinary one. And that is where you are headed. Not just toward the breakthrough moment, as real and as significant and as heaven-authored as that moment will be. You are headed toward the living that follows it, toward the inhabiting of the identity that has been spoken over you in this message, and confirmed through every season of pressing, and refined through every season of hiddenness. You are headed toward the daily reality of being the chosen one that heaven always knew you were, not performing that identity for an audience, not striving toward it as a destination you have not yet reached, but inhabiting it the way that Gideon inhabited his kingship after the battle, as something that was always his, returned to him by the faithfulness of heaven after a long season in which everything that was not essential had been stripped away. Because here is what the stripping away was always for. It was not punishment. It was not the consequence of something you did wrong, or failed to do right, or missed the opportunity to prevent. The stripping away was preparation for the inhabiting. You cannot fully inhabit an identity that is cluttered with things that do not belong to it. You cannot carry the weight of the true calling when you are simultaneously carrying the weight of every false identity that the world and the enemy and the painful seasons tried to press onto you in its place. The losses were not only losses, they were also clearings. The separations were not only separations, they were also definitions. Moments when what was not essentially yours became distinguishable from what was, because it was removed, while what was truly yours remained. What remains in you after everything that has been taken is not the diminished remnant of a person who went through too much. What remains in you is the most essential and most powerful and most heaven-breathed version of who you were always meant to be. The winepress did not remove anything that was truly yours. It removed everything that was not, and what is left is not less than what existed before the pressing. It is more, it is purer, it is more itself. It is exactly what was always placed inside you by the hand of heaven before the world had any opportunity to add to it, or alter it, or bury it under the accumulated weight of what was never meant to be permanent. Romans chapter 8 verse 28 says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose." All things, not the easy things, not the things that made obvious sense in the moment they were happening, not the things that felt like blessing while they were occurring. All things, the losses and the separations, and the transformations and the seasons of hiddenness, and the midnight altars and the winepress years, and the moments when heaven felt silent and the promises felt distant, and the identity that was spoken over you felt like it belonged to someone else's story. All of it working together. All of it being woven by a hand that does not waste a single thread, that sees the pattern from a vantage point that you could not access from inside the painful chapters, that has been moving every piece of your story toward a convergence that will. When you stand far enough back to see it whole, take your breath away with its coherence and its beauty, and its extraordinary evidence of a love that was never absent, even in the seasons when it felt most unreachable. The courage that you showed today, the simple and profound act of staying with this message, when every distraction in the world was available as an alternative, when the easier path of scrolling past and returning to the surface was always just a moment away, that courage did not go unnoticed in heaven. Heaven marks the moments when its chosen ones lean in rather than pull away. Heaven records the times when the hunger for depth wins over the pull of the comfortable and the convenient. And heaven responds to those moments, not with applause, but with something more significant than applause. Heaven responds with movement, with the invisible shifting of things in the unseen realm that cannot yet be seen with natural eyes, but that will become visible in the natural in ways and at times that you cannot fully predict or plan for. Something shifted today, not because of the perfection of your faith or the completeness of your understanding or the absence of your doubt. Something shifted because you were here, because you stayed, because the part of you that is most essentially you, the part that the winepress compressed but could not destroy, the part that the opposition targeted but could not permanently silence, that part leaned in toward what heaven was saying and received it. And that receiving, that open-handed, honest, sometimes uncertain but ultimately willing receiving, is the act that heaven has been waiting for. Not the performance of certainty, not the demonstration of unshakable confidence, the simple, costly, beautiful act of leaning in and staying and receiving what was sent. Gideon leaned in when he went down to the enemy camp in the dark. He did not have to go. Heaven gave him the option of going or not going. It was offered as a comfort, not commanded as an obligation. But Gideon chose to go down into the darkness and press close enough to the enemy to hear what they were dreaming. And what he heard there changed everything. Not because the information was new, heaven had already told him the outcome, but because hearing the enemy confess the decree of heaven in their own dreams, in their own language, from their own mouths, settled something in Gideon that all the previous reassurances had not quite reached. And he came back from that darkness and worshipped and gave the order. And the rest is a story that has been echoing through centuries. You leaned in today. You pressed close enough to hear something that the enemy would prefer you never received. You stayed long enough for the decree to settle in the place that needed to hear it most. And what was settled in you today, by the faithfulness of heaven speaking through this message, is not going to be easily unsettled. It has gone down into the roots. It has found the place where the deepest things live, and it has made its home there. And roots, true roots, the kind that grow deep, under pressure, do not release what they have received without a fight, that the surface-level storms cannot win. What is coming for you in the seasons ahead is not a continuation of the winepress. The winepress served its purpose. It produced what it was designed to produce. And what it produced in you is ready now to move out of the hidden place and into the landscape that has been waiting for it. The 300 raised their torches. The jars were broken. The light came out, and the darkness had no answer for it. Your light is about to come out, not in the way that the enemy has been working to prevent, not in the diminished and cautious and apologetic way that the difficult seasons may have taught you to offer it. In the full and uncontained and heaven-authorized way that was always intended, that was always the plan, that was always what the winepress was pressing toward. You were chosen before the pressing began. You are chosen in this moment of arrival, and you will be chosen in every season that follows, because the one who does the choosing does not revise his decisions based on the difficulty of the chapters he allows his chosen ones to walk through. He sees the end from the beginning. He saw yours before you took your first breath. And what he saw there was not someone who would barely survive the journey. What he saw was someone who would emerge from it carrying something the world had been waiting for, something that only the winepress could have produced, something that only a chosen one could carry. That chosen one is you. It has always been you. And the seasons that tried to tell you otherwise were simply wrong. There is a place you arrive at after a long journey that feels different from every other place you have rested along the way. It is not louder than the other places. It is not more decorated or more dramatic or more easily described to someone who has not yet stood in it. It is simply more real, more settled, more essentially itself than any of the stopping points that came before it. And you are standing in that place right now, at the end of this message, at the convergence of everything that was spoken over you in the sections that brought you here. And heaven wants you to know that your arrival here was not accidental and was not casual and was not simply the result of a video playing through to its conclusion. Your arrival here was the result of a journey that began long before this message started, a journey that has been moving toward this exact point of convergence through every season of loss and hiddenness and pressing and transformation that you have walked through. Gideon completed his journey, not perfectly, not without stumbling in the seasons that followed the great victory, not without moments where the weight of the identity that heaven had placed on him felt larger than his ability to inhabit it consistently and without error. But he completed it. He went from the winepress to the hill, from the hill to the battle, from the battle to the inhabiting of everything that the battle established, and the journey that he walked, from hiding to commissioning to obedience to victory to the living of the life that the victory made possible. That journey is the template for the one that you are on, not because your circumstances will mirror his in every detail, but because the shape of it, the movement from hiddenness to visibility, from compression to release, from the pressing of the winepress to the pouring out of what the pressing produced. That shape is the shape of every chosen one's story that heaven has ever authored. And now you are at the pouring out. You are at the place in the story where what was pressed out of you in the hidden seasons begins to move into the world in ways that are visible and real, and that touch the lives of people who have been waiting without knowing exactly what they were waiting for someone who carries what you carry to arrive in their landscape. The people who need what the winepress pressed out of you are not abstract. They are specific. They have names and faces and seasons of their own that bear a resemblance to what you have walked through. And they are looking for someone who has been where they are and who came out the other side carrying something more than survival, carrying wisdom, carrying depth, carrying the particular kind of authority that only comes from someone who has been through the pressing and has not been destroyed by it, and has not been made bitter by it, but has been made more essentially and more powerfully themselves by it. That is you. That is what you carry. And the world that those specific people inhabit is waiting for you to step into it with everything that the difficult seasons produced in you, openly and without apology and without the self-diminishment that the winepress years may have taught you as a habit of protection. The protection is no longer necessary in the same way. The hiding served its season. The compression did its work, and what emerged from it is ready to be poured out without reservation into the places and the people and the purposes that heaven has been arranging on your behalf through every chapter of the story that brought you here. There are people in this moment, people who are watching this message or who will find it in the days and weeks ahead, who are at the very beginning of their winepress season. They are just entering the compression. They are just beginning to feel the disorientation of losing something they built and becoming someone they do not yet fully recognize. And they are going to need, in that season, what you now carry. They are going to need someone who can say with authority and honesty and the particular credibility of personal experience, the winepress is not where your story ends. They are going to need someone who knows the inside of the hiding place well enough to describe it accurately, and who also knows the view from the hill above the enemy camp, and who can speak to both with the same voice and the same conviction. That person is you. That voice is yours, and it is ready. The God who found Gideon hiding in a winepress and called him a mighty warrior before he felt like one is the same God who has been present in every hidden and compressed season of your life, calling you by your true name, even in the moments when the name the circumstances gave you was louder. The same God who told Gideon to reduce his army and trust the gap between what he had and what the assignment required, who has been asking you, in season after season, to step forward with less than you thought you needed, and to discover that what heaven provides in the stepping is always exactly sufficient for what the stepping requires. The same God who sealed the victory before the battle began and let Gideon hear the enemy confess the decree in their own dreams is the same God who has already sealed what is coming for you, who has already arranged in the invisible realm the convergence of everything that your journey has been moving toward, and who is inviting you now to step forward into it, not when you feel ready, but precisely because the readiness that heaven requires is not the absence of fear or the presence of certainty, but the willingness to go anyway. And before this message releases you into the landscape of everything that is coming, before you step away from this moment and back into the ordinary and extraordinary reality of the life that heaven has assigned to you, there is one more thing that needs to happen, not because it is required as a condition of receiving what was spoken over you today, not because heaven withholds anything based on the performance of a ritual, but because there is a power in spoken prayer that goes beyond the cognitive reception of truth, a power that moves in the space between what we understand and what we receive, that takes what was heard and makes it owned, that takes what was spoken over us and presses it into the place where it becomes something we carry rather than something we remember. So receive this prayer right now. Let it land in every hollow place and every wounded place and every place where the winepress pressed hardest and left its mark. Let it find the root system that the difficult seasons built in you and water it one more time before you step forward into the season of the pouring out. Father, I bring before you the one who stayed, the one who leaned in when pulling away would have been easier, who had been in the winepress and has kept threshing wheat in the hidden place and has torn down altars at midnight when no one was watching, and has stood on the hill and heard the enemy confess what you already decreed, and has chosen again and again to keep their face turned in your direction, even when your face felt turned away. You see them completely. You have seen them in every season that felt invisible. You have been present in every moment that felt like abandonment. And you have been through all of it, working, pressing, refining, concentrating, building in the hidden place what could not have been built in the comfortable one. Speak their true name over them now, not the name the losses gave them, not the name the separation pressed into them, not the name the transformation left on them in its most disorienting moments. Their true name, the one you spoke before the winepress began, the one that the opposition could not permanently overwrite. Speak it with such clarity and such completeness that it settles in the deepest place and becomes the loudest thing in the room when everything else goes quiet. Release into the season ahead of them everything that the difficult seasons were preparing them to carry. The wisdom that only the winepress produces, the depth that only the hiddenness builds, the authority that only the pressing concentrates, the compassion that only the losing seasons create in a person who has felt what loss actually costs. Release all of it forward into the landscape that is waiting for them, into the people who need what they carry, into the purposes that have been held in trust through every season that looked like delay and was actually preparation. And cover them, establish them, guard them against everything that would seek to interrupt the pouring out before it reaches the people it was pressed for. Seal what was spoken today in the deepest place of their identity. Let it not be something they heard in a message, but something they know in the marrow. Something that holds when the storms move through. Something that remains when everything that was not essential is moved away. You found Gideon in a winepress. You called him mighty before he felt it. You sealed his victory before he raised a single torch. Do the same for the one who stayed through this message today. Do what only you can do in the invisible places where the deepest and most lasting things are built. And let what you do there become visible in their story, in ways that bring you glory and bring them into the fullness of everything that was always written over their life. Amen. Chosen one, you are not leaving this message the same way you came into it. Something was settled today that needed settling. Something was spoken that needed to be heard. Something was received in the deep places that is going to hold in ways that the surface level things cannot hold, that is going to remain when the next storm moves through, that is going to be the thing you return to in the moments when the winepress tries to speak louder than the decree. If this message has reached you today, if it has found the place in you that it was written for, then the simplest thing you can do right now, before you do anything else, is press the like button. Not as a reflex, not as a casual gesture toward content you consumed and are moving on from, but as a deliberate act of agreement. As your way of saying, this was real, this landed, this was worth the time it took to stay. That one small movement of your finger is the first act of the pouring out, the first way that what was pressed into you today begins to move outward towards someone else who needs it. Then, please share it. Pass it forward to the person who came to your mind while you were listening. Subscribe if you have not already done so, and stay connected to this space where chosen ones are seen and spoken to, and sent forward into the fullness of what was always written over their lives. And if you feel moved to support the work that makes these messages possible, the link to do so is in the description and in the pinned comment below. Every contribution is an act of partnership in something that is reaching people at the end of their endurance and speaking their true name back to them before they let go entirely. Heaven saw your courage today. Every attack that came against you just lost its power, and the season of the pouring out is not coming. It is here. You are ready. You have always been ready. and what was placed in you before the winepress began was always worth everything the winepress required. Go now and pour.